All right. Thank you. My name is Magda Pechnia. Here's my intro screen. My company does a process called the Tillmore process, which is a process that managers do every week with the people on their teams that gives them the information that they need to remove obstacles from their teammates' lives. And so you're actually managing the people that you really actually have on your team instead of sort of this fantasy group of people who don't act the way you want them to. So that's what I do. My basic philosophy of life is that humans are born, and what we do is we love other people and we work. If there's no work created for us, we will create work for ourselves. And if there's no love in front of us, we will create love for ourselves. And I feel that work is usually a form of love. If we get to choose our own work, it's a form of love. I also believe that managers are workers. A lot of times there are huge distinctions, and it's like managers versus workers. But the basic fact is most managers don't have as much control as they want to think they do, or that other people think they do. They're just coming in and doing work at the same time, and that management is work. So I do live in Detroit. I live on the west side. Woohoo. And I am a mom of two. I have one kid who's going off to college. I have another kid who's in Detroit public high schools. And I have two cats, and they roam around, and I am fighting the weeds in my Detroit yard to try to garden. So my undergraduate degree is in comparative literature, and I was talking with Ivana earlier about how that has kind of given me a unique perspective on a lot of the business stuff, because I'm not necessarily looking at it from the numbers side. I'm kind of looking at it from a narrative side, right? Like, what happens next? Is this the person that you want to be in this situation? What do you want your company to do, and what story do you want to tell about the world and your company with what you do and how you interact? Okay. I have my MBA from the University of Michigan, and I'm a mother, as I said, and I am also an entrepreneur. I got my MBA with no intention of going into the corporate world at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I was coming from a small company. I've worked in small companies my entire life. My dad owned a small company when I was growing up, and so my first job was data entry for him, and I have just always worked in small companies, so I really like being around entrepreneurs. But one of the things I noticed about entrepreneurs is that they are often very good at starting things, but they're not so great at maintaining the day-to-day. And that's going to segue into my first slide, which is that we are radically unmanaged as a nation of people. And what I mean by that is not that nobody's doing any management activities. There are a lot of management activities. There are a lot of systems and courses and trainings and keeping track of people and keeping track of when people come to work and when they leave and how many widgets they've produced and all that kind of stuff. But there hasn't been traditionally a lot of managing and facilitating how people work and how people are in a workplace. So that means we're sort of under the gun all the time, and we're being judged, but we're not being helped and we're not being encouraged. As a result, entrepreneurs tend to hate management, right? Because you wouldn't be starting your own company if you wanted to be someplace else being managed by somebody else. And I think that that is something that is not, like, it's not good or bad, right? If we are not being managed well as a nation, it doesn't say anything bad about you as an entrepreneur that you don't want to be managed, right? It also doesn't say anything bad about you that you don't want to manage people. There are a lot of people who deliberately don't grow their companies very big because they don't want to have to manage people. And if you're in that situation, that's completely valid. I'm guessing that because you're here, you are thinking, aha, I'm okay with growing my company bigger. And so I need to think about, do I want to be managing people? Do I want to be hiring people to manage other people? And the answer to that is probably yes. Okay. So when you get big enough, you do actually need managers. I really think that managing in the workplace is very, very similar in a lot of ways to parenting, in that you want to be a steady presence that can help your people, give them a blueprint of what's supposed to happen and how they're supposed to get there, give them the tools that they need to get there, and kind of help them head off problems at the pass, right? You wouldn't, if you were a parent, just wait for your kids to go out and do something bad just specifically so you could punish them. You also wouldn't do that as a manager. You wouldn't just give your people no instruction whatsoever and then they screw up the Johnson deal and you're like, ha ha ha, you screwed up the Johnson deal, you're fired, right? You know, you need to step in with a little bit of guidance ahead of time, and that's really what managing is. So if you are by yourself right now, you are not managing anyone except for yourself. Maybe you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people working with you and you're very, very flat organization, and so it's more like coordinating, but it's not really managing. Well, as soon as you start having people at different levels, you're going to have managers. It's a whole different webinar to talk about how you expand so that you don't have people that are trying to do a full-time job and managing people underneath them. So we're just going to assume that at a certain point, you're going to get to the point in which there's somebody who can function and do the functions of a manager without having to do another full-time job or another full-time job and a half, as sometimes happens in small entrepreneurial companies. All right. So these are the things about work, and they don't always happen in corporate America. You are hoping that because you control your environment, that these are the things that are going to be true about working for you, and for everybody else who works for you, okay? Number one, everybody should feel good about work. That doesn't mean you love every single thing you do, right? But you should not be crying in your car on the way to work in the morning. You should just feel good about what it is that you do in the world. You should feel good about your position and how it's going in general. Everybody should feel competent about work. Now, you know, you're always learning new things, right? And there are new systems coming down the pike. And if you have anything to do with regulation, there are always new regulations, that kind of stuff. But you should always feel a baseline of competence, like, oh, I can do this in my job. If you don't, all that means is you're in the wrong job function. And that's very easily solvable, okay? And then everyone should be unencumbered to do great work. So when I'm teaching my process to managers, the story that I usually start with, and remember I'm all about the stories, is that almost everybody, when they interview for a job, and then they get the job, are kind of excited about it, because you usually interview for jobs that you know you can do and that you know you can do well, right? So you come in your first day and you get your email assigned and all that kind of stuff. Or, you know, if you're working a job that doesn't involve email, maybe you get your uniform assigned or whatever it is, and you get really excited about things and you have these ideas of how you're going to function in your job. And then right around week 3, you start realizing that there are all kinds of things that are preventing you from doing your job as well as you wanted to do it, right? Maybe it's systematic things, so you don't have something that you need to do the job. Maybe your clients really don't want to participate in the process with you the way that you thought they were going to. Just something gets in your way and it feels insurmountable, okay? I think that that's a big, big problem, and that really one of the tasks of the manager is to make sure that when somebody hits an obstacle, the manager helps them remove that obstacle. Whether the manager takes it away from them or the manager empowers them, the manager is helping them so that they're no longer encumbered and they can do great work. All right. So, truths about managing. A lot of people have experienced managers who are punitive, who are just waiting for them to screw up, who feel like they need to motivate them. If you're in the right job, your motivation is that you're good at what you do and you get paid for it, right? So you shouldn't need to have something gamified to actually want to do your job. So what managing should be is creating a safe container for people to do their best work. Now, what do I mean by a safe container? Sometimes you're actually physically making a space safe for people. If you own a retail location, part of your job as a manager is to make sure that the people who are working in your retail location are physically safe, right? But sometimes it has nothing to do with a physical location. Sometimes you're just inside a larger organization that may have some backbiting, that may have some dog eat dog. There are some companies that have chosen systems that pit people against each other. There's a really large computer company that has as a rating system that a certain number of people on each work team have to be fired every year. And so everybody on the team is just backbiting. That's not safe, right? So in that kind of situation, you as a manager would need to create an environment on your team that creates safety for your people. Okay. Managers, as I said before, remove obstacles and interference for people. And that can be things that are as simple as, like, you can't figure out how to order more copy paper from the company because there's something blocking you from ordering copy paper, so you can't copy anything or print anything out, right? Or it could be some problem communicating or making a deal or negotiating with an external partner or with a client. It could be internal problems with people. It could be any number of things, but it's the job of the manager to step in when people are unable to resolve things for themselves. Often it's not that the people are inherently unable to resolve it, it's just that they don't have access to something that they need to resolve it. And then the other thing managers do is support their team members to excellence. So you are the person as the manager who is seeing what your people do on a regular basis, and you're also seeing what they enjoy doing, what they're getting better at, and what their specific strengths are. So when you see that, you need to keep helping them and giving them more opportunities and more training and more chances and all that, so that they can become better and better and better and better at the things that they are already better at. So to manage effectively and kindly, because I think those are the things that everybody wants in a manager, and that you want to be as a manager, and that you want to hire managers to be, is effective and kind. They need to use processes. Now, I think a lot of times in smaller companies, and especially companies that started with one idea person, right? Like the classic entrepreneur who has this fire underneath them and is just burning with passion, either about starting a company and being successful, or about the topic or the content of the company. And a lot of times it's a mix of the two, right? Like, you know, you came up with the best water bottle in the country and you're determined to get that water bottle into everybody's hands. Or you really want to run a company that operates in a certain way, and so you need to come up with some product that will allow you to have that company. I think most entrepreneurs are kind of a combination of product and company oriented, you know, mission oriented. So a lot of times what happens is the fervor and the excitement becomes the main driver of everything. And so when people come into that situation, they just kind of have to fit in wherever they can around that excitement of the movement. And then at a certain point, you have 30 people on your team, and suddenly it's just sort of too exciting, and they're isn't enough regularity happening. The way to fix that is to create processes that people aren't necessarily going to notice every minute of the day. It's just, okay, on Mondays we do this, right? And it takes us 10 minutes and then we're done. But now we know exactly where this is or that is or what we're supposed to do next, right? And so people don't have to think all the time about these processes. They just do them when it happens. And then you can still have all of that excitement and all of that mission without having things get really chaotic and without having some people be silenced in a group and disenfranchised, and having other people sort of take things over, even if they are not producing as much work as the people who don't take over. Okay. All right, so why do you want to use processes? Processes are boring and processes are inherently unsexy, so they kind of go against the grain of what most entrepreneurs think they're supposed to be, right? But there are three big reasons for processes. Number one, they save you time, energy, love, and chaos. Remember I said that there's a lot of love in doing work, especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're working for a startup. If you're employee number 2, if you're employee number 12, right? Like there's a lot of love in that. If you have a process that you do every day, every week, every month, whatever, and and you just do it, you don't have to love it. You don't love brushing your teeth, right? You don't love unloading the dishwasher. You just do it because if you don't brush your teeth fall out. If you don't unload the dishwasher, you don't have clean dishes. The same with these processes. You're going to save yourself a ton of time on things because you don't have to reinvent it every single time, right? You just do it the same as always. And then you always know where all your numbers are, where all of this and that and everything else is. It's going to save you a lot of energy because you don't have to come up with things new every time. You just know, oh yeah, Thursday I have to run this report, right? Or on Thursday I have to go into the storeroom and do inventory, or whatever it is. You're saving a lot of energy for the things that actually require your brain and that only you can do, okay? Saves you a lot of love because, again, you can then save love for the things that need it, like new ideas or clients or the other people that you work with. And it also saves you a lot of chaos because if you're doing these processes all the time, even if you miss a week, I can go back and look at the week before. You're not ever going to be in a situation in which you genuinely don't know what has happened, or you genuinely can't predict what's going to happen next because you just don't know what your numbers are or what's been happening with clients or where certain objects are or things like that, okay? They also institute fairness. So if everything that happens in your company is a separate event, then people will not be treated fairly and with equity, because I could go in and talk to the founder and ask for something, and depending on what the founder knew about the situation, they might say yes or no. And then somebody next to me could go in and ask for the exact same thing and get a totally different answer, just based on the weather or perceptions of how sales were doing that day or any kind of thing like that, right? If you have a process for, okay, in order to get object X, you need to do this, and then whatever, right? That becomes fair process because it's equal for everyone. And if there are exceptions, they're recognized as exceptions and they can be noted, and you can create a process for exceptions too. Okay. They also embed transparency in the whole process, because then it's not like, oh, well, if you get on so-and-so's good side, they'll let you do this, right? I can tell the health of an organization by how they use information. And if people are hoarding information and using information as currency, that is a sign of an organization that is not healthy. And organizations can limp along for decades while being unhealthy, but you will make a lot more money if you're healthy and if there's transparency. So if you're using processes for things, if you have records of things, if everybody is a participant as they need to be for their job job position in the process, then things are transparent and nobody's feeling bad about things. Nobody's trying to make side deals. Nobody is trying to steal clients from you to go off on their own, that kind of stuff. All right. So processes are very important, even if they're still not that exciting. So, all right, back to what managers do. They facilitate their workers and they remove friction in the entire process for the workers. Okay. So what if you could do that for yourself? You can do that for yourself too. You can facilitate your own work. You can remove friction from your daily life with processes, making your own life better, right? Like, do you have some kind of system of where you put your keys when you walk into your house? That's a process, right? You walk in, you put your keys in one place, you do something with your shoes, take them off by the door and put them in the basket or, whatever, and then usually have something that you do next. You have a process. If you don't have that process, everything kind of feels chaotic and you do things 3 or 4 or 5 times more than you needed to do. Okay, so it's going to make your life better. If you have a small team that's flat, you're going to make life better if you have processes too, because then everybody can kind of check in with each other. A lot of times a process for a small team literally just looks like a checklist. And then if you have a checklist, if you have these processes, as soon as you start getting teams that need to be managed, you can transition into those without having this big moment of, oh, wow, we don't really know how we can do that. How do I train somebody else to do it if I don't know how I do it? Well, if you know exactly what your process is, all you have to do is hand the new person, hey, this is how we do this. Okay. And then they can do it. Right? And you can keep track of it. All of you together can keep track of it. All right. So I think that there are 3, maybe 3.5 management processes that you need to be functional, whether you're by yourself, whether you're a small flat team, or whether you have managed teams. Okay. The first one is obviously project management. Now, I know that everybody knows when you have a bunch of people working on a project, you need to have project management processes. I think it's better for you and it will save you time. It'll save you a lot of sleep if you tend to get anxious about stuff. If you just start using project management processes now, and I think, in 2020, there's no reason you shouldn't be using project management software. There is so much good project management software out there, and I don't know. I think that the specific software you want to use completely depends on what industry you're in, what you're doing. But I would say you need to be willing to spend a little bit of time exploring project management software, and don't be afraid to pay for it and start using it even if you're by yourself. Because what happens is you'll have it all in there. You'll be able to keep track of everything. You'll know where everything is all the time. You'll know where you are in process X or in this part of the project or whatever. Then let's say you need to hire a freelancer who's only going to help you for 1 month. You just fold them into that software. Hey, here's where we are. Put your stuff in there too. Let's say that you hire 2 new people to be permanent with you. All you have to do is bring them into that software and they get folded in, and you don't have to have this big, huge learning curve to have other people working with you, because it's all held in that software for the project management. Once you have managed teams, then it just sort of becomes levels inside that software of which projects are happening when and who can see which parts of which projects are happening, right? But it's absolutely worth investing in money for project management software. There's some great free project management software too, but don't be afraid of putting a little bit of money into it. Also, don't be afraid of putting a little bit of time into it to play around. Ask people you know what project management software they use. Do they like it? Do they not like it? A lot of project management software is run by small companies and entrepreneurs like you who would be honestly thrilled to get on the phone with you and talk to you for 15 minutes about what their software can do and what it can't, or have some sort of chat conversation or text conversation with you, that kind of stuff. It's definitely worth the time to invest in finding project management software and processes that are going to work for you. Okay, now the next one is workflow and communication management processes. Now, I put them together. They're not the same thing, but for a lot of organizations, they're inseparable. So workflow means, how do you do your work? How do you do your processes? Not necessarily just the project, but who sits next to whom, who has access to different documents, who is the lead on certain things and who's the lead on other things. How do you do whatever the process is that you do from start to finish, capturing things that wouldn't necessarily be captured in the project management, including client communications, communications with other vendors you have, that kind of stuff. So you see that workflow and communication management, it really has a lot of overlap. So I like to consider them together even though they're separate. Something that happens a lot with entrepreneurs is you are so thrilled at the beginning that anybody wants to give you money to do or buy whatever it is that you'll take the communication any way it comes in, right? Like people are sending you orders by Facebook private message, and maybe somebody sees on Instagram what you're doing or selling, and so they message you there, and people are texting you and people are sending you emails, and then maybe you have some sort of collection system like a form on your website or stuff like that, and it's coming at you all the way it is. And if you have 6 clients, you can keep track of that. But then at a certain point, it just gets out of control. And if you have another person that you're working with, or another 2 people, or another 5 people, and you have all of those channels, not only of communicating with clients, but of communicating with each other, that can suck so much time and so much energy just trying to remember, okay, was that message in Slack? Was that message in my email? Which email? Which text? Was it on WhatsApp, right? All that kind of stuff. So part of the workflow process is deciding 1 or 2 or maybe 3 ways that you're going to communicate internally with your people and that you're going to communicate externally with your clients. Now, if you have huge client deals and not very many of them, you can communicate any way your client wants to. If your client is giving you $10 million, you can text them or you can message them however they want to, right? But if you are like most entrepreneurs with a lot more clients and smaller deals, just communicate by whatever are the ways that are easiest for you to keep track of, and communicate with your people internally in the same kind of way. All right. Then the other thing you need is a people management process. And that's what my process is that I teach to existing managers. What I mean by people management process is, how are people when they are at work? Okay, and some of that is while they're communicating, some of that is while they're doing workflow stuff, some of that is while they're doing the project-related stuff, but it's all that extra stuff like, I don't have copier paper. The air conditioning in this building is up so high that I literally cannot type because my fingers are too cold. So-and-so and such, a client's office refuses to talk to me and I don't know why. All kinds of stuff like that. I feel minimized, nobody listens to me in meetings. All that kind of stuff really affects the way people do their jobs. And no one is going to just volunteer that information to a manager because they don't want to be seen as a whiner. So that means the manager needs to have a regular process in which they solicit information from their people about all of that kind of external stuff, right? Like, what is making it difficult for you to do your job, or just for you to be in this company, right? The other thing about people management is you're constantly trying to figure out what are you people good at and what do they like doing, so you can give them more so that they can get faster, so you can produce more, because people are doing the things that they're really engaged in and really good at and really show leadership in. And without a way to track that and a process to figure it out, it's really hard to tell. I mean, you can always, there's always that one person you can tell, aha, they're great at that. But what about the people who don't talk all that much and don't really toot their own horn? You need a way to figure that out, about how they are going to work through everything that they work through. Okay, so let's talk about the project management processes. For yourself, you absolutely want to use the software to keep track of your own projects. Put the time into choosing it. If you choose a software and 6 months down the road you realize it's not the one for you, it's not the worst thing in the world to switch, right? I know there are a lot of people who are like, I'm invested in this, I need to keep going. I personally think that as soon as you know something's not working for you, you need to just ditch it. Don't throw good money after bad, right? But while you're working by yourself, this is a really good time to figure out if this project management software is working for you. And then once you have more people working with you, you invite them into the system and you're playing a little bit with the edges of that system to see if it works. So by the time you have managers to spin off working on their own teams, you know that it's going to be what you need to use. So you can see that it will grow with you as long as you are able to trust and let the software keep track of things, so you don't have to keep everything running in your head all the time and be waking up in the middle of the night, that kind of stuff. Just put it in the process. If it makes you feel better, you can do a backup twice a day on the software. You can print out stuff if you like to have a hard copy of it, that kind of stuff. But yeah, let the software help you. Now, there's an extra side benefit of using project management software that I think is something that trips up a lot of a lot of entrepreneurs that they don't realize. When you're first starting out your company, you are so grateful for the business that people give you that you are willing to do whatever it takes to get that gig. And it's very easy to lie to yourself and tell yourself that, yes, it's worth it because they're paying me. Well, if you're using project management software, even if you're not technically keeping track of the hours that it takes you, you can see where you're actually making money and where you're leaking money. And, let's say there's somebody who is paying you X, but you're spending so much time trying to get and keep their job that you don't have time to do a job for somebody who's going to pay you X times 5, right? Entrepreneurs can lie to ourselves for a long time because we want things to be true. If you've got it in your project management software, you can force yourself to look at it and say, right, okay, maybe I need to consider backing off of this one and pouring on the steam there. So it is crucial for entrepreneurs to know where you're actually making money and where you're leaking money in the whole process. All right, so now talking about workflow and communication management processes, you really need to document how things get done. My dad is a management consultant, which is, he never thought I was going to end up being a management consultant either, especially when I went to college and majored in literature. But we have conversations about this stuff all the time. I mean, I guess I just grew up in it, and so that's why I thought it was something worthwhile. And so he's been a management consultant in IT world for like 40 or I don't know how many years. And one time he said to me that he figured out that if he comes into a new gig with people that are having massive, massive problems in their organization and asks every single person to document their part of the process, and then he takes those pieces of paper and he lays them out and he draws together the story, what he finds every single time is that there are gaps that nobody knew existed, and that's why their process is failing, because there are gaps in it. So if you start as an entrepreneur documenting how things are supposed to go, what's the workflow from the time you start communicating with your client till the time you get paid from your client after giving them everything, how does that go? And then when you've got 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 people working with you, you fold them into that workflow and you reassess that workflow every 6 months or every 12 months. And then by the time you have managed teams, you fold them into the workflow and they know what their part is. They can tell the exact story of what their part is, but you and several other people in your organization need to be able to tell what the entire story of the workflow is. There's all kinds of software for that too. I would recommend keeping process flow data in some kind of software and having hard copies of it someplace else so that you can physically look at it. A lot of people have like a whiteboard kind of situation, or they'll have things pasted up on a wall somewhere so they can switch things in and out. And remember that part of that is the communication management process, and part of that is simply making the decision of how people are going to communicate with each other. You may end up, if you don't make any decisions, you are going to end up in a reply all situation where you're getting emails all day long from your people, and you are going to get yet another reply all email and say, why did I start a company? I could have stayed in some place and been getting a pension and had a headache every day if I was going to get reply all, right? You can cut that off at the pass by making decisions about how you want communication to happen in your teams, and just start as you go by yourself. When you add new people, continue that communication process with them. New communication methods are always going to come out, so you're going to have to keep reassessing. And then as you get managed teams, just make sure that everybody's communicating the way that is most efficient and effective so information doesn't get lost, and so that you have transparency and you have equity. You want everybody to be able to communicate to their managers, communicate to you, be heard. Not feel like they are not being valued because of things that are external to how they're actually doing their jobs. Okay. All right. Then the people management process. I think this one is the one that people are most likely to skip for themselves. But if you do this for yourself, every week, document for yourself what caused problems for you, not like some internal like, oh, I felt lazy, right? But what caused problems for you this week and what worked for you this week. And if you keep track of it and write it down somewhere, you will be amazed, because you can go back and look at what was a problem for you 6 months ago and what worked, and see how far you've come and how much problem solving you've done and how much better you are at doing this thing. You've gotten faster, you've gotten more efficient, you've gotten more clients, all that kind of stuff. Then once you have a flat team of people, if everybody individually is documenting what caused them problems and what worked for them, and then you are every week talking about those things and also documenting what caused problems for the team and what were wins for the team, then you can kind of see momentum and you can see where you're going, where you've been, what's coming up next. It's really easy to predict what you need to do when you have written down what has been happening for the previous 6 months. Okay? And then once you have teams that are managed and you are having everybody document what created problems for them and what worked for them, that enables your managers to protect and facilitate people and develop their leadership skills simply by following what the people are reporting in on it. They don't have to have these, magical powers of predicting what's happening to people, and they don't have to be trying to spy on people and listen in on people's lunches and all that kind of stuff that now isn't even possible now that everybody's working from home, because people will just tell you, hey, this was a problem, right? And it's amazing if people tell you what's going wrong with them and you can fix it, like, you're the best manager ever, right? So, oh, whoops, that, I don't know why. Okay, so the process sustains itself. So the more you put into these processes, the more they're going to give back to you because they'll be stable. You'll know, I just do this on this day. And then if I have a question about what happened 3 weeks ago or 3 months ago or whatever, I can go back and look. And I have more time in my head for developing new products or finding new clients or doing better work and expanding and all that kind of stuff. So all of these processes are going to sustain themselves. All right, so over time, your trust level with everyone and with yourself is going to increase. The entire team is going to cycle more rapidly because everybody's going to start having pattern recognition from doing all these processes all the time, and you'll develop economies of scale so nobody has to reproduce anybody's work. It establishes a record of reporting things, so you stop being so anxious about stuff because you know that you have it written down and recorded somewhere. It lets you make comparisons and goal setting that are legitimate instead of just how you feel, right? You can roll the tape. You can go back and look and see, hey, last June, how are we doing, right? Or if you need to rate people on your teams, you can look at how they're doing against themselves instead of how they're doing against everybody else on the team. And it also gives you clarity for when you're moving people into leadership roles because you have a record of what everybody's obstacles were, what their wins were, how they did in the projects, and how everybody communicated and how they fit into that workflow. So when you've got all that process data, you know who's doing really well, who needs to be doing something else, who maybe needs to be in a different job function, who's ready for the next thing. So to do now, this is what you probably came to see. So the first thing is to spend some time looking at a project management system that is going to be able to expand to other people. And if you have other people on your team right now, involve them in this process, because if you already have them, they might as well like it just as much as you do from the get-go. So spend a little time, ask around, ask people what they like and don't like. If it's a smaller company, ask for a callback or some kind of Zoom session with somebody who's higher up, the founder, the person who started it, and talk about, is this going to work for me? How would I configure it to do this, that, and the other thing? Okay. And then start using the project management system, even if it's just you, even if it's you and one other person, if it's you and 5 other people. Okay. But start using it consistently. It will take a huge load off your mind. The second thing that you can do at the same time is make decisions about communication processes and workflow processes. So decide, how do I want to communicate with clients? How do I want to communicate internally? I don't care how you do it, right? Some people love Slack. Some people love Discord. You could run your entire company on Discord if you wanted to, especially if you're 16 years old and your company is a video game company, right? But you know, just make decisions. What do you like the most? Again, if you have a couple of people working with you already, involve them in this process so that everybody is enjoying how you're communicating and everybody can keep track of it and nobody's losing messages and this, that, and the other thing, okay? And start writing down the process of the workflow. If you have other people working with you, involve them in this too. Just spend a little bit of time documenting it like a story. So, you know, first, here's how I find the potential client to talk to. And then this is how we have our first conversation. And then this is how they make their decision. And then this is how I make my decision. And, you know, go the entire process so you know exactly what it is. And as you're charting it out, you might realize that there's something missing or that there's something that could be improved. You've already gotten sort of your time's worth on doing that. And then the third thing is start regularly. I prefer weekly. Some people like to do it bi-weekly, but I prefer weekly. Document your own obstacles, things that were difficult for you that week and that prevented you from getting everything you wanted to do done the way you wanted to do it, and your wins every week. put it down someplace where you can go back and look at it and you can keep track of everything that happened, good and bad, so you can see where you came from and where you're going. And if you have other people working with you already, ask them to do this too and share your little obstacle and win reports with each other so that everybody can see what everybody else is dealing with, and you can help each other through the problems and you can celebrate each other's wins. Okay, so that is what you should do now. Here's my contact information. If you have questions for me, my name again is Magda Petchenia, and my email is magda@tillmoregroup.com. I am at Tillmore Group on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and everywhere. And the website for the process that I teach managers is tillmoreprocess.com. You can go look at that. So there's Ivana.
Hi. That's all right. Come in and hello there. I definitely would, for one, want to thank you for what I believe to be an extremely informative presentation here. We definitely have a comment here from Maria, said you give very sage advice. And I I could not agree more. Honestly, it's funny. Me personally, I have been in managerial positions, but then I became an entrepreneur. And as an entrepreneur, when people ask me advice, I was like, you don't want my advice. You don't want me to tell you what,
Right.
You don't want me to tell you what I
Right.
would do, and it's funny because I say that all the time because, yeah, it is about ultimately, like, so you give that sage advice, but ultimately it's about having the same processes all
Yeah.
around, and that's the best way.
Yeah. Well, and I think that people don't need advice as much if they have a process, right?
Exactly.
Because if you have a process, you end up giving yourself advice because you remember
Right.
how it worked the way before, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're like, but see, you didn't have any issues then. Go back to that.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, if you're the actual entrepreneur, you think you should be seeing everything that's going on underneath you, but there's just no way for you to do it, right?
No.
And so if stuff is written down, then you can figure out what you need to figure out. You don't have to say, well, let's see, who was it that did that, right?
Now,
And you don't have to be doing some informal networking in your own organization, which otherwise happens. There's that show up where the CEO comes down and does a job with the normal people, and everybody's like, oh, it's just the best because he's coming down and he's being a regular person. And I'm kind of like, oh, I think this is kind of horrible because he should already know what it's like to work at that level in his company, right?
Right.
And it's almost always a he. So.
And a lot of times it's usually not the founder.
Right.
Exactly. It's like the CEO or someone who's been put in a managerial position.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that if entrepreneurs, I think, sometimes feel guilty about hiring somebody to run things for them. They feel like they're the one who started the company. It's their baby. They should be running the day-to-day operations. And I think that anybody who is in that position needs to just let that go. Let it go, right? Like
all entrepreneurs, listen to this lady, okay? Yeah. She is telling you great advice.
Because you didn't become an entrepreneur because you wanted to be signing off on expense reports. Right? But there are people who love signing off on expense reports. And I feel like everybody wants to be in their zone of genius. So stay in your zone of genius. There's no shame in starting this company that's amazing, and then hiring somebody else to run it, to hire other people to run it. And then what do you do then? Well, that's your choice, right? Like, you can stay and be the mouthpiece of the company if you want to, or you can go on and do something else. I kind of am attracted to the serial entrepreneurs who just are like, okay, I made this big. Now somebody else is running it. Now let me go do another thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the term serial entrepreneurial. This is awesome because those are people, you think of entrepreneurs as starters. I know you mentioned it earlier. And so they like to start things. They have ideas. They like to start things. So, hey, I mean, when you know what your thing is, you know what really makes you happy, stick to what you know. Absolutely. That's what you're good at. And then go grab those people who really like signing off on expense reports.
Because there are people who really love it. Like, And why not? I used to joke with a friend of mine who's a serial entrepreneur he's a good friend of mine from business school, that we should every year reserve a 10 by 10 booth at a trade show at like a software conference or something like that, and just come in and hand out pencils or some other whatever and just talk to whoever stops into the booth and make some dumb name that's like, Loveco or something like that, right?
Mm.
And just ask people what they want. Ask them what product is missing in their life, and then we would go home, make that product, sell it, and then come back the next year and ask people what they wanted and make some other product and sell it. So you'd just be doing something different every year and only based on market research of the people who happen to drift into your booth.
Who happened to drift into your booth in this trade show, So there's definitely that. So it's awesome. And I thoroughly enjoy you. So I want to thank you personally and also on behalf of the Detroit Startup Week for being here with us today, Magda. I got this. Check. Yay.
So close.
Listen,
I
gotta stop looking at it. I'll hear it in my head and I'm like, oh, I got it. And I look at it and I don't have it anymore. So Pechenia, Magda Pechenia, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you so much, participants, for being here and being active and definitely just honestly, just enjoying this Detroit Startup Week virtual edition. Definitely being here and sticking with us through all of the changes.